Welcome to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case.
And I'm Carly Cicali.
On today's program, Republicans demand documents relating to the Biden family.
Meanwhile, public schools struggle to get back to pre-pandemic levels.
And Samaritan's purse brings earthquake relief to Turkey. Okay, happy Friday, everyone. Let's kick things off with politics, where defense officials defended their decision to wait 8 days before shooting down a Chinese surveillance balloon during a tense Senate briefing yesterday, while also saying the balloon represented the increasing threat from China.
The PRC is the only competitor with the intent and means to reshape the international order. Last week, the American people saw the latest example of that reality after the U.S. government detected, closely tracked, and shot down the PRC's high-altitude surveillance balloon that had entered our territorial airspace in clear violation of our sovereignty and international law. The Biden-Harris administration responded swiftly to protect Americans and safeguard against the balloon's collection of sensitive information.
Senators from both parties grilled the officials, demanding to know why the administration waited over a week before deciding to act. Montana Democrat John Tester accused the officials of not having a plan for these kinds of situations, noting that last week was not the first time a spy balloon entered U.S. airspace.
The real question here is that if we had an incursion before and we shot this one down when it hit water, why didn't we shoot the previous ones down and gather intelligence from those so we knew what was going to happen? And by the way, this is going to happen again. And so why haven't we? Either this is no big deal in the military's eyes, and I don't think you're going to say that, or there's not a consistent plan on how to deal with them.
Officials said they deemed the threat posed by the balloon to be low or moderate, and they also reiterated concerns that shooting the balloon down over land could harm civilians on the ground at the time and also cause problems for the recovery operation.
At any moment, had it presented some sort of intent to hurt Americans, they would have taken that balloon out of the sky. It would have happened.
A key piece of this is the recovery. For us to be able to exploit and understand this balloon and its capabilities fully, if we had taken it down over the state of Alaska, which is part of the United States, it would have been a very different recovery operation.
This comes as the House voted unanimously yesterday to condemn China for its spying efforts.
When President Joe Biden's calls for civility and cooperation with Republicans in his State of the Union seems to be short-lived. On Thursday, he visited Florida to paint conservatives as villains out to harm the elderly.
I know that a lot of Republicans, their dream is to cut Social Security and Medicare. Well, let me say this. If that's your dream, I'm your nightmare.
He later accused Republicans of wanting to slash legislation that would allow Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices. Biden is banking on voters caring enough about this to support the entire Inflation Reduction Act, which many experts have predicted will have no discernible effect on inflation. Biden also proceeded to name Florida Republican Senator Rick Scott and Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson as leading culprits of these cuts. Scott has spent the last several days firing back at Biden, even challenging him to a debate over the two men's record on Social Security.
Elsewhere, 21 Republican-led states are urging the White House to declare Mexican drug cartels as terrorist organizations. In their letter to the White House, the states noted that drug overdoses have killed more than 100,000 Americans over the past year, and they say 66% of those deaths can be attributed to the drugs smuggled across the border. This letter argues the national security issue is also not just a drug crisis either, as terrorist organizations like Hezbollah have strong ties to the Mexican drug cartels. In addition, the cartels have amassed large armed forces to protect their drug empires, resulting in attacks on American citizens. This letter follows a tense State of the Union address where Republican lawmakers called out the president for his inaction on the opioid crisis.
Meanwhile, FISM had the chance to speak to Luis Valdez, the state director for Gun Owners of America in Florida, on a bill proposed in the Florida legislature concerning firearms. During our interview, Valdez explained why the bill doesn't quite go far enough in terms of a constitutional carry legislation. Here he is.
The biggest issue with this legislation is it's not a real constitutional carry bill. every state that has passed constitutional carry, that's 25 states as of now, as of today, they passed a bill that makes it to where you don't need a permit to conceal carry or open carry a firearm. This bill will only allow concealed carrying of firearms. Furthermore, it doesn't remove the ban on open carry. It doesn't remove the ban on individuals that are of legal age to carry on university campuses to defend themselves. It doesn't repeal gun-free zones. It doesn't repeal the mandatory waiting period in Florida. It doesn't repeal the other gun-free zones that litter the state. So this bill is kind of watered down, and the governor pledged to Floridians that he would sign a true constitutional carry bill, not this bait and switch that the Republican legislature is trying to pull. I like the governor. I think he's done a very good job in Florida, but on Second Amendment related issues, he hasn't been that aggressive. He hasn't been that supportive. Yes, he's been asked if he supports constitutional carry, but he's never held a specific press conference to tackle this issue. He's never really used his office as a bully pulpit to push this issue. And furthermore, he hasn't weighed in whether the bill should have open carry or not. He's been kind of silent on this. All of his statements have just been the very safe, hey, if the bill reaches my desk, I'll sign it. I support this. Check, let me mark this checkbox type statement. And again, I think he's done a great job compared to our previous governors.
Well, that was just a part of a much longer interview which touched on gun control nationwide and even Governor DeSantis as a prospective presidential candidate. You can watch the full interview on our website right now at FISMnews.tv.
Meanwhile, the House Oversight Committee is formally requesting information regarding the foreign business dealings of the Biden family, including the president's son Hunter and brother James. The committee is investigating if the Biden family has used Joe Biden's political positions to, quote, sell access around the world. The investigation aims to uncover if President Biden knew about or was involved in the family's business dealings and if any foreign business deals compromise national security. President Biden has dismissed the investigation, saying it's not going to go very far.
One of the things Republicans say is a priority for them is investigating your family. How do you plan to deal with that?
The public's not going to pay attention to that. They want these guys to do something. If the only thing they can do is make up things about my family, it's not going to go very far.
Meanwhile, Republican Senator Chuck Grassley says an FBI whistleblower has informed him that the Bureau does have evidence of potential criminal conduct in the Biden family. In addition, Grassley says there may even be evidence that the president was aware of his son's business dealings.
When Special Counsel Jack Smith has subpoenaed former Vice President Mike Pence to testify about the January 6th Capitol riot. The subpoena is part of the Department of Justice's ongoing investigation into former President Donald Trump. Pence has become one of the central figures in the DOJ's January 6th investigation. As vice president, Pence presided that day over the Senate's certification of the electoral votes that would confirm Joe Biden's victory in the 2020 election. Trump had pushed Pence not to certify the vote, but he refused. Smith is now seeking documents and testimony from Pence to determine whether or not Trump committed a crime by asking this of the vice president. However, it's believed Pence may invoke executive privilege to shield himself from answering certain questions. Meanwhile, in more news relating to the former vice president, the FBI reportedly searched Pence's Indiana home earlier today, checking to see if any classified documents remained in his possession. And now we're going to head into our first break, but stay tuned for more coverage after this.
From the very beginning, you are the greatest teacher your child will ever know. You teach them to choose their friends carefully and to guard their eyes, their hearts, and minds against what could harm them. Everything you invest into your children will determine how they will go on to serve the kingdom. Every choice matters, and you teach them that their choices matter as well. But are we leading them to be good stewards of the blessings they've been given? We all want what is best for our kids, and as Christians, we know that to teach our children about the value of how they spend their time and their money is simply one of the most practical ways of applying biblical principles to their daily lives. Here at Timothy Plan, we filter and focus our investments on companies that maintain pro-life and pro-family values. Before investing, consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses. Contact Timothy Plan or your financial professional for a prospectus containing this and other valuable information. Please read it carefully. Distributed by Timothy Partners, LTD, member FINRA.
When I first thought I was pregnant, it was like the scariest thing that I've ever had to deal with. I just kept telling myself, I can't have a baby right now. This lady was walking down the street and she was like, oh, I know a place where you can get an abortion done. I went in and Ms. Jackie was like, well, would you like an ultrasound? And I was like, sure, whatever. She was giving me the ultrasound and she turned on the sound and my baby had a heartbeat. This is the very first ultrasound that I got with the Pregnancy Help Center, and I'm very grateful for it because just this one picture alone helped me make the decision that I made to keep my baby.
Give moms across America the chance to hear their baby's heartbeats on ultrasound. Visit preborn.org today.
Welcome back to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case. Let's continue with some national coverage. Public schools across the country are still struggling to reach pre-pandemic enrollment levels, even forcing some of them to close for good. FISM's Ian Patrick has more on this.
Thank you so much, Sam. Well, public schools across the nation are struggling to reach pre-pandemic enrollment levels as millions of parents have chosen to enroll their children in homeschooling or private schools as an alternative to public education. And it's no surprise, during the pandemic, many public schools decided to instruct students through virtual learning instead of in-person instruction and experienced teacher shortages as well. These changes factored into children falling behind in learning and parents pulling their children out of the public school system in favor of, as I already said, homeschooling, private school, or charter school enrollment. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, or NCES, enrollment in public schools dropped by over 1 million students between 2019 and 2020. Their report says, quote, prior to this period, total public school enrollment had increased between fall 2009 and fall 2019. Axios reported that a Wall Street Journal analysis found enrollment fell in roughly 85 of the nation's largest 100 public school districts. Additionally, the New York City public school system, which is the largest in the nation, saw an 8.3% drop in public school enrollment between 2020 and 2022. Perhaps even more alarming, an analysis released by the Associated Press and Stanford University found that currently about 230,000 students in 21 states had simply gone missing, meaning that their absences at the schools could not be accounted for. Now, these students never moved out of state or into another school, they just stopped appearing to their classes. The effort to re-engage these kids in schooling has dropped off as well. As a result of significant drops in enrollment, many public schools have even chosen to close their doors since school funding is tied to enrollment, according to the New York Times. The Wall Street Journal reported that Jefferson County, Colorado decided to close 16 schools. Meanwhile, 5 schools in St. Paul, Minnesota shuttered their doors. Many reports have shown that parents became increasingly concerned over their children's learning during pandemic school closures. Polling from June 2022 reported by Bellwether Education Partners revealed that 65% of parents were concerned about their children's academic progress, and 58% were worried about their children's mental health and emotional well-being. According to the nation's report card, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is a test to gauge students' performance and measure the general state of education in our nation, reflected that average scores for age 9 students in 2022 declined 5 points in reading and 7 points in mathematics compared to the year 2020. This is the largest average score decline in reading since 1990 and the first ever score decline in mathematics. Even for those who remained in public schooling, online instruction is becoming a sticking point. The AP reported that some educators and parents are questioning decisions in cities from Boston to Chicago to Los Angeles to remain online long after clear evidence emerged that schools weren't COVID-19 superspreaders and months after adult vaccines became widely available. This is Ian Patrick reporting for FISM News.
Thanks for that report, Ian. Now let's move to some international news in Ukraine. Russia unleashed wave after wave of missile and drone strikes throughout Ukraine Friday as its forces continued closing in on the Donbas region. As Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky wrapped up a European tour seeking military support, Moscow's forces carried out strikes in Ukraine's east, west, and northern central regions. The strikes caused widespread blackouts. Ukraine's Air Command said it shot down 61 of 71 Russian missiles in less than a 24-hour period. Ukraine's energy minister says that Russia struck power facilities across 6 regions with missiles and drones, leaving a large swath of the country without power. Meanwhile, Ukraine's military claims that Russia has been burning its own dead in an attempt to conceal massive troop losses. Ukraine says the bodies are being incinerated at a mobile crematorium.
Meanwhile, more than 200 Nicaraguan political prisoners were freed and flown to the U.S. yesterday. Nearly all of them are outspoken critics of Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega. U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price gave more information on this effort. Here he is.
A plane arrived at Dulles International Airport carrying 222 individuals who had been held by the government of Nicaragua. Some of these individuals had spent years in prison. The government of Nicaragua decided to release these individuals, and the United States decided to receive them on humanitarian grounds. Everyone who left the country voluntarily consented to travel. The release of these individuals by the government of Nicaragua marks a constructive step towards addressing the human rights abuses in that country. This action opens the door to discussion of other matters of mutual concern.
The freed political prisoners include 5 former presidential hopefuls who sought to challenge Ortega in 2021. That year, Washington imposed sanctions and denounced Ortega's re-election as a sham. Ortega's political allies plan to strip the prisoners of their citizenship, cutting off any hope of them returning to their home country.
And China has drastically changed its former stance on population control and will now offer free fertility care in an effort to reverse the nation's population drop, according to yesterday's report from CNN. Many sociological experts believe the change is a direct result of China's longtime draconian one-child-per-family policy of the 20th century. In 2022, the same year that India officially surpassed China as the world's most populous nation, the population of China dropped by almost 1 million. This is the first time it has decreased at all in 60 years. According to CNN, China's National Healthcare Security Administration announced late last week that it will provide financial assistance to families who are trying to have children. The one-child policy resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of innocent Chinese children, the death of those children both inside the womb and outside. The policy was discontinued in 2015, but a 3-child-per-family restriction is still in place as of 2021 amendment. It appears that these restrictions have caught up with Chinese authorities, who are now forced to make a 180-degree turn to regenerate population growth.
Meanwhile, in the Middle East, rescue crews are seeing glimmers of hope as they continue to recover survivors 4 days after the devastating earthquake hit southern Turkey and northwest Syria. One man shared his story of being pulled from the rubble and then miraculously, reunited with his 2 young sons.
We fell and I found myself under the rubble. The civil defense pulled me out. They also pulled my son Mustafa out with me. I didn't know anything about Ibrahim, so I was surprised when they reached out to me telling me he's alive.
As of this morning, the confirmed death toll stands at 21,000. Hundreds of thousands have also been left homeless and short of food in bleak winter conditions. Meanwhile, the World Food Program says it's running out of stocks in northwest Syria as well, where 90% of the population depends on humanitarian assistance. And up next, we have an exclusive interview with Edward Graham of Samaritan's Purse, whose ministry is on the ground in Turkey providing medical relief to the earthquake victims. We'll be right back with that interview after a moment in history.
Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. In the mid-19th century, the American political landscape was dominated by 2 ruling systems. The Whig Party was one, often seen as the successor to the old Federalist Party and the predecessor to the modern Republican Party, and the Democrats were the other one, dominated by the Southern Warhawk style of Andrew Jackson. In this episode, let's explore a man who would serve as the 11th president of the United States and the last president of that first-era Democratic Party of Jacksonian ideals, a man by the name of James K. Polk. Polk was born in 1795 from the state of North Carolina. In this time now, presidents typically rose to office either from military fame or from success from the practice of law, and for Polk, it was the latter. After studying and practicing law, he rose up the political ladder during the presidency of Andrew Jackson. Now, during the presidency of Jackson's successor, Martin Van Buren, Polk served as U.S. Speaker of the House. In the presidential election of 1844, Polk was nominated on the Democratic ticket against the incumbent Whig president President John Tyler. Polk defeated Tyler to begin his term in 1845. Now, one of Polk's most important accomplishments in office was the establishment of the northern boundary of the northwestern United States along the border of Canada to sit on the 49th parallel. The treaty was signed with Great Britain amid tensions between the two nations, but Polk managed to get it signed in 1846 without the outbreak of war, and to this day, the 49th parallel marks the northernmost boundary of the U.S. west of the Great Lakes. Now, speaking of war, Polk's term was also influential in the formation of the southern U.S. border. Unlike in the North, war did break out in the South with the outbreak of the Mexican-American War. But after 2 years and an American victory, Mexico gave up large portions of land that would become the southwestern United States. For two reasons, Polk neglected to run for a second term. The first reason was his belief that it would actually help the Democratic Party as a whole, but the second was his declining health. And sure enough, later in 1849, the same year that he left office, Polk passed away at the age of 53. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.
FISM News is a conservative news source with a biblical worldview. With us, you get just the news grounded in truth. And now, with the new FISM TV app, it's even easier to take FISM News with you wherever you go, so you're never behind on what's happening. Not only are FISM News articles updated regularly throughout the day, but you can now easily access and read them right from your smartphone. And with just a few taps, you can share stories with friends through messages, email, or social media.
Tragically, and all too often, a young mother in an unplanned pregnancy is in crisis. You can be there for her by giving a life-changing ultrasound through Preborn. Seeing her baby on ultrasound is a game changer, doubling the chances she will choose life from 40% to 80%. For only $28 a month, less than $1 a day, you can show a mom her baby on ultrasound.
It's important to be prepared for the future, so we invest now to be responsible and ensure our financial future. But what many of us don't know is that how we invest just might be dishonoring to our Lord and Savior. There are companies that you could be investing in that support pornography, gambling, abortion, human trafficking, and other things that God detests. Invest with integrity. Invest biblically with the Timothy Plan.
And welcome back once again. I'm Samuel Case. Well, this week we have certainly been following the fallout from the devastating earthquake in Turkey and Syria, which, as we just mentioned before the break, has claimed over 20,000 lives. Today, I was able to speak with Edward Graham, the COO of Samaritan's Purse, whose ministry is setting up a field hospital to bring medical aid to the people of Turkey right now. Here's a small part of that discussion.
When it arrives, it'll get offloaded, and the government of Turkey is going to help us, along with, we believe, I think right now even some of the U.S. government is helping us get it to the location quickly. So it'll land near Adana, and then it'll be transported close to the epicenter. So this will be the historical area of Antioch, and this is Atikia is how I believe you pronounce the city. But there's a hospital there that was destroyed. It's about a 1,000-bed hospital that Turkey had that's been completely destroyed, and they're triaging patients right now in that parking lot, but without equipment because everything was in the hospital. It was leveled. And so we're going to go to that parking lot, and that's where we're going to set up. And the goal is within about 24 hours of once it arrives, is setting it up and it'd be operational. Now, this is about a 52-bed surgical orthopedic style hospital that we know we're going to be treating crushed bones, broken bones, broken bodies. And so we'll have a surgical and post-op. We have other care there. And then we're there just to meet other needs. We're taking other equipment with us. So hygiene kits, tarps. So people that have lost everything, this is a time that we see like cholera outbreaks like you did in Haiti after the earthquake there. Without clean drinking water, we can provide clean drinking water. We have water filtration systems we can send over. So it's just not this hospital we're going to send. We'll send additional flights, additional equipment, as needed as things arise. So just pray for the team and what they're going to see and for what they're going to be a part of there.
You can donate to their ongoing effort in Turkey by visiting SamaritansPurse.org, and be sure to, of course, be keeping them in your prayers as well. And if you'd like to see that interview in full, be sure to visit our website, FISMnews.tv, and check under the featured section.
Well, in some other news, the Internal Revenue Service has unveiled new guidance to crack down on tips received by food and beverage industry workers. The proposal is a voluntary tip reporting program between the IRS and employers in various service industries, according to the website. The agency stated that employer participants will demonstrate compliance with the program requirements by submitting an annual report after the close of the calendar year. The program will also offer liability protections to participating employers. Critics slam the new proposal, saying that it will only be a matter of time before the guidelines move from voluntary to compulsory. Some accused President Biden of lying when he promised that his proposal to increase funding and staffing for the IRS would only be used to help the agency target the wealthy.
Meanwhile, Project Veritas founder James O'Keefe was placed on paid leave by the nonprofit's board of directors this week. An internal message from Veritas said O'Keefe would be taking, quote, a few weeks of well-deserved PTO. Project Veritas later released a statement to Twitter saying the board is constantly evaluating what the best path forward is for the organization. The exact reasons for the paid leave status remains unknown, but some of the problems may surround O'Keefe's alleged workplace behavior, which was reportedly described by some employees in a recent memo as being at times, quote, outright cruel. The Project Veritas board is meeting today where they will allegedly discuss the possibility of O'Keefe's removal.
When a new study found that 61% of women who had an abortion reported facing pressure to have the procedure done, resulting in negative mental health effects. The peer-reviewed study was conducted by Charlotte Lausier Institute, a pro-life organization. Researchers polled over 1,100 women aged 41 to 45, out of which 226 said they'd had an abortion, which CLI says aligns with national abortion estimates. Out of these women, 61% reported high levels of pressure from either a male partner, family members, financial concerns, or other circumstances. Women who felt pressure to end their pregnancy were also more likely to experience grief, regret, and an overall decline in mental health. CLI recommends that abortion providers be aware of pressured abortions and be prepared to offer counseling and services that will help women to avoid unwanted abortions. The Institute says the study is the first in a series of planned studies to investigate the impact of abortions on women.
And finally, of course, sport fans are awaiting the Super Bowl this weekend, where the Philadelphia Eagles will face the Kansas City Chiefs at State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona for Super Bowl 57 on Sunday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. This game comes as Kansas City quarterback Patrick Mahomes won the AP NFL Most Valuable Player by a landslide, followed by Philadelphia quarterback Jalen Hurts in second place. Interestingly enough, for Christians, there will also be an interesting slew of advertisements to watch for, as the Jesus Gets Us ad campaign will have 2 commercial spots during Super Bowl coverage. The organizers have paid $20 million for their airtime in an effort to bring the gospel into the homes of hundreds of millions of viewers, even for just a few seconds. Man, those ads are expensive.
Yeah, they sure are. Hopefully there's some good ones this year. All right, well, that's our program for today. So thank you so much for joining us. Please visit FISMnews.tv for more content.
And for any updates, you can also check us out on social media. And don't forget to download the FISM app to your smartphone or download the FISM channel to Roku or Amazon Fire TV. Thank you so much. God bless, and we'll see you on Monday with more news coverage.